Viewers, you are welcome to your favorite program, EYEWITNESS. This is a program, as you know, that takes a different approach from the normal programming in this country. We focus on individuals who have devoted their lives, their energy to contribute to the public good, to contribute to their community, to build a better society than the one they found. Our program, therefore, tells a different story from the normal Nigerian story of corruption, self-aggrandizement, self-interest. And I think, as we always say every week, it is important to know that there are many Nigerians whose outlook to life is public service. Today, we are addressing a topic that's extremely close to the heart of Nigerians, that of peace. Peace, especially where people live. Peace in their local environment, in their local governments, in their states. And if the question of peace has become so important in Nigeria today, it is because over the last few years, we've had so little of it. And there are Nigerians that have been working hard on peace building. Today for our program, we have one such Nigerian who is the country manager of the USIP, United States Institute for Peace, Peace Building Program of Nigeria. Ambassador Abdezango, you are welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
It's really a pleasure to have you. We do work often together on your programs, and I felt it is important that the wider community gets to meet you and hear more of your contributions to this important issue of peace. But before going to peace, let's start with your background, your community. Where were you, where did you attend primary school?
Incidentally, I attended 3 primary schools, starting with Musawa, in Musawa local government in Katsina State in the early 60s, 1962. My father was the headmaster at that time, and I started primary school. It was a boarding school for seniors, but it had a wing of primary school 1 to 3. So I started there, and barely 2 years later, my father was transferred to Malumfashi, and I followed him, of course, and I was quickly registered because the new boarding school he was transferred to had no provision for primary school 1 to 3. So I had to attend Galadima Primary School in Malumfashi for a year and a half. Finally ended up in Funtua, in the famous Aya Primary School, Funtua, where I did from class 3, class 4, right to primary 7. I finished in 1968 and then joined the then provincial secondary school, later government secondary school, Funtua, where I attended from 1969 to 1973. It was such a wonderful experience. Perhaps I may highlight some of the issues that really had great bearing on my life from there. I grew up in the true extended family tradition. My father, not just, we had siblings from my mother and her other my father's second wife, but my father also had this tradition of bringing others from relations, from very close friends and all that. So I grew up with these people, and that really had a major impact on my life, because I grew up not just like detribalized, but I grew up in a very community setting, accommodating everybody. We grew up as if we were from the same father. It was much later I realized that some of them were simply children of colleagues of my father, but we grew up together up to adulthood. And today I remember that with nostalgia, because it was such a very wonderful training that really now shaped my life in trying to accommodate others and live in harmony, total harmony. I think this is something which we are missing now, and I think it's something that we need to restore as soon as possible.
Well, you are not the only famous person to go to Musawa. Your teacher, Bala Usman, Dr. Bala Usman, was also from Musawa, wasn't he?
He was from Musawa, but when I was in Musawa, Bala Usman was in Zaria that time. Even though I schooled with some of his siblings, I remember very well, Safia was one of them. But he was in Zaria and then later in England. But I schooled with some of his relations. In fact, it was the Circuit Musawa Kitka. It's a kind of not SUV, I would call it. It's a utility vehicle that he used to convey us to the school and bring us back. So quite a number of times I would spend time with his siblings in the palace at that time. It was such a wonderful experience.
Indeed. After Funtua Provincial Secondary School, you went to Ahmadu Bello University, is that it?
That's right. No, I went to College of Advanced Studies. At that time, it was known as College of Arts and Science Zaria for the A levels. That time, we were the first set to do the IJMB. The HSC system was on transition at that time. The final year students were being weeded out. So we were the first set of students to do the interim joint matriculation examination. Also, we were the first students to write WAEC, the West African School Certificate, in June. So we used to be called experimental students. So usually the school year used to run from January to December, but during our time, it was January to June. So we technically spent 4.5 years in secondary school and did that. So I was in Zaria, in Kas Zaria, from 1974 to 1976. I finished my IJMB and then joined Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, where I studied political history. History, political science at that time is what is called combined honors. And incidentally, Professor Jubo was one of my teachers.
Well, the gap between us isn't that much, so don't give the impression I'm an old man. Yeah, the retired ambassador and therefore the old man, aren't you?
Yes, but of course you must give credit to your teachers. I remember those wonderful times in the area with radical scholarship, left-leaning. The younger generation at that time were being groomed to uphold the liberal scholarship for obvious reasons. The kind of perspective our countries went through, the independence struggle and the challenges after independence. So at that time, at that material time, it was probably the best option. Well, it was very exciting time. Schooling at that period really offered wide range of options in terms of scholarship, in trying to understand dynamics what you call the dialectics, how societies were developing from the primitive to the more modern economy. I think we had that privilege, which I think the current generation did not have in that sense.
Yeah, surprisingly, going to Zaria during its phase of radical Marxism and all that, graduating, and you went into the Foreign Service. How do you explain that?
Yeah, I actually, before I went to the Foreign Service, I was in the academics. I came back to my alma mater, College of Advanced Studies Zaria, and I was teaching history. And then I went to England, the University of Birmingham, to do a master's degree, which I completed in 1983. I still came back. I joined Ahmadu Bello University for a short period between 1984. Wanted to start postgraduate to do another master's degree, but I couldn't. And in 1987, I joined the Foreign Service. Many of my colleagues used to say I committed class suicide but I thought that in terms of the kind of my perspective from the theory, from some of the things we learned from Professor Jubu, Professor Oyabere, and several other great scholars there, it was quite handy in the Foreign Service. It really helped me navigate through the murky waters of diplomacy.
Let's talk a bit about the role of the diplomat in peacemaking. Does a diplomat have a role in peacemaking, or does he just follow whatever directives come from their state headquarters, as it were?
The diplomat has a fundamental role in peace building because, first and foremost, the job of diplomacy is basically to strengthen or entrench friendship between nations, but between people also. So the diplomat is as much a peace-building instrument, and he has a lot of tools to do that in trying to advance the interests of his country and its core values. The key indices is peace, love, and understanding, building partnership. And peace is central to that. And of course, you know, in diplomacy, we are always told that the best way to address issues, no matter how intractable, is dialogue. And of course, you know, even in the event of war, you still come back to the negotiation table. So peace is central to the work of the diplomat. And I can tell you, in the period where I served as a diplomat at a very early age, I was privileged to participate in many peace-building efforts. I was a African Union. At that time, it was known as the Organization of African Unity Observer at the first non-racial election in South Africa, 1994. The reality is the Organization of African Unity took us there. I was nominated by my country, by my embassy, and I went to Joburg. But the Organization of African Unity didn't have resources. But they had a large number of us sitting there to observe the elections, but could not deploy us. But the UN, on the other hand, has so much funds, but very little personnel. So they requested the organization if they could make use of us, and behold, the OAU said, you can go ahead. So we transformed from being the African Union observers to the UN observers of the first non-racial election. It's an epoch-making occasion. I was in Cape Town, in the townships, Guguletu. I was a special assistant to the chief UN observer who at that time was the Ghanaian intelligence chief, Captain Kojo Sikata, and I was with him in Cape Town. At that time, Cape Town was the hotbed of violence. If you remember very well the historical context in South Africa during that no-racial election, it was the most violent. We were there. There was so much despair and expectations. But at the end, it went on very well. The South Africans came out, demonstrated their desire for total independence from decades of apartheid. They wanted to enjoy the fruit of independence, spearheaded by Nelson Mandela and several other comrades. And elections went on very well. Mandela won that election. I'm very proud to say. And then thereafter, I participated in several others in the Democratic Republic of Congo, when I was also in Zimbabwe, going to see how some of the peace process were going on there. I was also in Rwanda when the genocide took place there. We were among the first set of people to go and do an assessment. I teamed up with General Agwe, who was then the defense advisor in Zimbabwe, and joined him. I was also an observer to the peace process in Mozambique, which Zimbabwe was brokering between Afonso de la Cama and the regime in Mozambique. So diplomacy had really prepared prepared me for a lot of peace-building initiatives, and I learned so much from that. And back home, I was part of the team that was negotiating the Abuja 1, Abuja 2 peace process between the SPLM and the Sudanese government. I was part of that team that was negotiating Babangida Brukat, that initiative between John Garang, who was then the SPLM leader, and the Sudanese government. And at the end of the day, they were able to sign several of these agreements. It wasn't the perfect agreement, but it paved the way for, if you like, relative peace and, if you like, a unity government between the Sudanese government and the Sudan People Liberation Movement. So really, I think that
you were prepared by your life as a diplomat. So let's come back to your current role, where you are the country manager of the United States Institute of Peace. Maybe you could tell our viewers what that work entails. What do you do in the USIP?
Yeah, I came on board as country manager USIP in 2018. Period to that period, I served in Washington. It was there I retired formally from the diplomatic service. I had known USIP. I used to participate in several of their activities and develop a lot of friendship and reach out to several of them. So I was not surprised when they fished me out from time to time, and we were instrumental to helping them set up their structures. In the first was the inauguration of what they call the working group of eminent personalities in Nigeria, up to the time they hosted the Governors Forum in 2016. Incidentally, Professor Jubo was one of those members, and he's still a member of the working group. So when the USIP made the approach that I should help them set up the office, I couldn't resist, because not only my teachers, several of high-level colleagues within the working group said, look, you are the right choice. So I came on board, and the USIP has this philosophy that a world without violence is possible, achievable, and practicable. And the work they do in Nigeria and in over 80 countries is real testimony to that effect. In Nigeria, USIP operates on a tripod, three levels. The first is the working group. The working group, now they have metamorphosed into the Nigeria Working Group on Leadership and Governance. And it's made up of about 11 personalities, eminent personalities: Professor Jubo, Professor Tahiru Jega, Cardinal Onayekan, Aisha Oyebode, Ambassador Fatibala, General Martin Luther Agoy, Dr. Piase, Dr. Chris Kwaja, Professor Gambari, who incidentally is now Chief of Staff, so he has taken leave, Dr. Usman Bogaji, several others. These are people eminently placed in Nigeria in various fields of endeavor. We also have the Sultan of Sokoto, who is also a member of the working group. So these are strong voices, and when they speak with such authority. They have major influence, they have character, they have integrity, and that has really helped when they try to speak about voices of peace, dialogue, how to address the various issues affecting Nigeria, very complex society. Is a very big vehicle. So the working group have been doing so much in that direction. Then, of course, we have the second element, the peace-building agencies. These are institutions that the USIP has helped some of the states, particularly those states that have been ravaged by incessant conflicts ranging from ethnic, religious, farmer herders, many other conflicts that are very much prevalent in Nigeria. So it was in the wisdom of USIP that when they set up these peace-building agencies, these institutions, they will be in a better position to manage these conflicts, address the grievances, and try to mitigate or try to bring communities together for dialogue, for peace, and sustainable development. And USIP has been very successful in that regard in Kaduna and in Plateau, and we have been expanding now to Adamawa, to Benue, Nasarawa. Several states have indicated interest to set up these peace-building agencies. At the inception, USIP had helped them in terms of the setting up of the structures, capacity building of some of the staff, and giving them guidelines on how to really do dialogues, how to do peace building, and all those. And they have now become institutionalized in those states, and we're working with them. The third element is what the USIP called the Network of Nigerian Facilitators. These are young men and women that live in communities, that are passionate for their communities, that are passionate for development, passion for peace and sustainable development. They bring up projects that are have direct bearing on peace, dialogue, and we give them small funding, assist them in carrying out these projects. Most of these projects are peace inclined, organizing dialogue between farmers and herders, trying to address grievances, maybe communities that have been at war, trying to see how they can bring them together or bring a common bond and all those. And we have over 40 of these young men and women spread across all the geopolitical zones in Nigeria, doing one project or the other. It's a great success story, and we're expanding these things. So far, USIP has really done that. A major strong point of USIP also is a number of conveners. It organizes using the working group and the other stakeholders in the area of peace and conflict mitigation. we have always been doing. We do convening, particularly during the COVID era. We did a lot of convening on building trust, which is a major challenge in Nigeria, trust between government and citizens. At the core of some of the challenges of governance is trust. When citizens do not trust those who run government is a big challenge, and during COVID, it was clearly demonstrated, and we did a lot of convening, and the working group came in handy to do that. Convening around peaceful, credible elections. We do a lot of that during elections, whether at the local level or national level. We do convening so that emphasize the need that elections is the best option of choosing and changing those who govern us. It's very important to entrench that tradition, that people have the right to choose and change those who govern them through peaceful means, through the exercise of their franchise, do a lot of convenience on registration, voter apathy, so that people should know that when they exercise that right, it's a civic right, and it's only the main opportunity for them to choose and change those who govern them, particularly if they are not happy with that. We also do a lot on peace education in that sense, using the working group and many other stakeholders. So we have come a long way, and we are very satisfied with the work we are doing. And as we move towards 2023 election, we have organized a lot of such convenience, a lot of activities centered around that, media engagement, convening with clerics, so that we address the issue of this religious violence, the divisions around religion, and all those that have really continued to bedevil our country. So USIP has really tried to address, if you like, a whole range of conflict and other related areas that continue to bedevil the country. One of the greater things that works for USIP is the fact that all these are locally driven. USIP does not pretend to have all the answers. So these are local initiatives. Once they work, we help to accelerate or drive them or give impetus to whatever initiative the local communities are bringing. And it has been working on very well. So we've been doing quite a lot, and the working group really is a major instrument for achieving this.
Very good. Viewers, we'll take a short break. We'll be right back. Viewers, welcome back to the program. We've been having a wonderful conversation with Ambassador Zango Abdu, who has been speaking over the last 15 minutes about his role as country manager for the United States Institute of Peace. I think he's outlined all the key activities they're engaged in, and had concluded on that important point that for all these activities, it is the initiative of Nigerian groups that take primary precedence rather than depending, as it were, on an external monitor. I think clearly for a country such as ours, this search for peace is so important. And now, Ambassador Zango, what I thought we could focus on for the rest of the interview is the importance of how you approach peace, where you've always argued, I've worked with you for quite a number of years, that the local is extremely important. Why do you place so much importance on local initiatives in peacemaking or peace building?
I want to anchor this from a very famous statement by a revolutionary, and I know Professor Juba will understand if I quote a revolutionary, Amilcar Cabral. He said, people are fighting not because of ideas or the great, wonderful creation of things in anyone's head. They are fighting for material benefits. They are fighting to see their lives move forward, to guarantee the future of their children, to really address bread and butter issue. So it's not the ideas, it's not Marxism, all this. If you want to address conflict, go to the local level. It is at the local level you address this. It is at the local level people know what their problems are. They also know the solutions. The average Nigerian ordinary person would rather be left alone to live his life. As long as he is given the enabling environment, he will develop himself, he will develop whatever initiative, and he will achieve his goals. So we are anchored on that. When you address conflict at the local level, you virtually solve the problem of the larger community. Conflicts are local. They start at the local level. And in all local environments across Nigeria, and this is despite the, if you like, the differences in tribe, ethnic groups, religion or faith or whatever, there are mechanisms for addressing conflict. I recall in 2017, during the 2019, during the elections, I was in Adamawa, and we were assemble all the local leaders to see how to address the issue of violence, issue of conflict as we move towards the election. During elections, you need an atmosphere of peace for elections to take place. Without peace, you cannot do elections, you cannot do anything. And for most of those traditional rulers and individuals who came, each told us the local dispute resolution mechanism they have that are working, and that if they are left alone or if they are strengthened, they will be able to address the bulk of this. So that is one area I think we are taking advantage of. And I believe also because we abandon this addressing conflict at the community level, that's why we have this upscaling, or if you like, escalation. So in USIP, we have this assumption, or if you like, idea of trying to encourage local initiatives using traditional institutions and traditional alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. Whether you are talking of farmer herders, whether you are talking of ethnic or conflict over land and all those, you go through the local communities, the local institutions, local mechanisms, provide impetus for them. Like when we use our facilitators, they turn out wonderful results. And if we could do that in virtually every community in Nigeria, it will be a force multiplier. It will be incremental. And I think it was because that gap of allowing the local initiatives to strive to address conflict that had been created over time, that is now creating the kind of situation we are faced today. So that's the main philosophy behind this looking at the local level. And of course, when you go local, you are virtually using the instrument that had been there entrenched over a long period of time. Some of the dispute resolution mechanisms had been there thousands of years ago with the evolution of those societies. So you are not bringing in some ideas from elsewhere or from somebody who think maybe if you have these ideas, you can cross-fertilize them, they will see the value addition or anything. But the local initiatives, if you provide impetus, they will address those challenges in a manner that will really give you considerable satisfaction that you are getting somewhere. My key point here is that because we abandon those local initiatives, particularly spearheaded by our traditional institutions, we are nowhere. It's just like the thing you taught us, the crisis between tradition and modernity, and our inability to strike that balance is what has created this dilemma. And in contemporary times, it's not dilemma, it's what has created this large chunk of conflict in various manifestations. So I think that's one of the key areas we focus on addressing conflict at the local level.
How do you think traditional rulers could be brought back to play some role, especially now that these conflicts have multiplied and are everywhere?
I think we made a key mistake, particularly with the local government reforms that really stripped traditional rulers of all powers.
And Obasanjo, 1976.
That's right.
And then the Dasuki report.
Precisely. But I think it's not too late. In everything we do, sometimes we do say we go back to the basics. There is no harm if we go back to the basics. We look at the institution of traditional rulers, and you know very well the working group had been playing a very key role. A very important member of the working group is the Sultan. And within his constituency, we have tried to see how he can mobilize strong voices among the traditional institutions, side by side with the clerics. Last year, we were able to hold the first tripartite meeting between the working group, the Nigerian Interreligious Council, and then the Peace Commission. It brought together broad spectrum of traditional rulers, clerics, and intellectuals to look at the state of the nation, to look at all the serious conflicts that continue to bedevil that country. So that area. So I think a constitutional role for traditional rulers is not is something that we can put on the card. And then the role they used to play, particularly at the level of the linkage with community policing. If you know very much in the north, the Native Authority traditional rulers used to wield considerable powers in addressing disputes, grievances. If you enter into any territory or any emirate, the traditional ruler knows. Today, traditional rulers don't know who goes in or goes out, and that's why you now have bandits ravaging a large chunk of what we call ungovernable space in Nigeria. These are spaces that were governed. But today we call them ungovernable space, and it's largely because a key institution that you use to regulate movement of people, communal engagement, harmony, religious, all sort of interaction, including economic, has been literally abandoned because of political expediency. So I think this is one area we can do that. And then, of course, community level policing. That one is also very important. That community level policing may not necessarily be government induced. It could be the local community, but well regulated, so that you don't have another parallel vigilante that will also be rivaling the bandits that are ravaging community, regulated such that it works for the interest of the community in protecting lives and property.
I have the impression government is overwhelmed. By 2010, when this problem started spreading, was focused on Borno, Yobe, then Adamawa, and now is virtually everywhere in the country. And what I'm beginning to wonder is government confident it can develop solutions to these problems?
Yeah, the major challenge is that considerable number of conflicts and crises. This country, as you all know, is a very complex society already. They have been allowed to fester. When we allow things to fester, then they will escalate. We have not developed an enduring culture of dealing with this situation, addressing grievances, addressing the issue of governance, addressing the issue of inclusiveness, addressing the crucial issue of poverty and deprivation. These are at the core of the challenges facing Nigeria. And it's not just about the North, the South, it's in the whole country. And when you allow that over time, this is the kind of situation you are faced. So naturally, government is overwhelmed because these things have not been addressed. And since they are not addressed, they have been allowed to fester. They have escalated to the level that are beyond the, if you like, capacity of the resources and, if you like, both human and material for the government to contain it. So that is one level. Over a long period of time, we have faced deficit in governance. It's not about this government, it's not about the last government. We are talking about deficit in governance in the last 20
cumulatively.
Yeah, 30 years. You recall sometimes people begin to even ask the key question whether this democracy works. Well, of course, we know that the worst form of democracy is better than dictatorship. But people are clearly asking these key questions. Is this democracy really leading us to the destination of peace and sustainable development? These are the key questions being asked today. And it's largely because of these escalating, if you like, conflicts. We are no longer talking of pockets. We say Boko Haram and all those. This overwhelming, if you like, challenge to governmental authority, to peace, to security, and even way of life that has afflicted the whole country. So we need a whole, if you like, cocktail of human and material resources to address that. Address the deficit in governance, address the issue of poverty, address the issue of inclusion, address the issue of justice. These are very crucial. And once you don't do that, and this deficit continue to increase, and then of course conflict sets in. And when it sets in, people are disintegrated, disentangled, and then space is created. That space will be occupied by any element, including criminal element, and that is what is happening across the country. Across the country.
Yeah. Well, we are now moving towards elections that will be holding in February next year. There's so much conflict, so much violence, so much worry, so much agitation. What are your concerns moving forward? Do you remain optimistic?
As a Nigerian, I have to be optimistic in the sense that at the end of the day, this country belongs to all of us. And we must work assiduously to make sure things work. As we approach the elections, every Nigerian, not just me, is concerned with this escalation of violence, the large issue of grievances that have not been addressed, grievances from inclusion, from ethnic groups, from resource control, from several of these things. Of course, also the large, if you like, escalated level of poverty, lack of education. A friend of mine used to tell me that one of the most complex combination is illiteracy and poverty. A person who is illiterate and poor is very difficult to reform. He said, so this is one of the challenges we are facing. So the government is facing quite a number of things to address and front. But when I say the government, it's not just those in power. It also involves all of us. We all have to do our bit to ensure that there is relative peace as we go into this period of elections. The enabling environment is created for people to go and choose and change those who govern them. That is key. And they are given the right to exercise that franchise freely without hindrance. Not only that, it is also very important that as a people, we commit ourselves to ensuring peaceful elections. And winners be declared. Those who lose the election should be courageous enough to accept that defeat and then join hands so that we'll build a greater nation. So yes, there are concerns, but there are also vestiges, or if you like, window of opportunities for us to recalibrate and ensure that we approach this period with such commitment. And I think one major impetus is the Electoral Act. Over the last couple of years, we have seen how elections have been changing. And a lot of doubt is now being removed from the minds of people that votes will count. We have seen that in Ekiti, we have seen that in Oshun. And then, of course, there are challenges here and there about vote buying, about some disruptions here and there. But technology and several other impetus have been brought on board, and they're helping to make the process quite encouraging and positive. And moving forward, I think all Nigerians should seize the opportunity in that we have seen almost 96 million people have registered. And that's about 50% of the population. That's a remarkable achievement. And if their votes count, really, I think we are in for a major change. So I remain cautiously optimistic about the future as a Nigerian and as a key stakeholder. And from the point of view of a peace builder, we'll do all we could to take opportunity to encourage people to seize the initiative and ensure that they exercise their franchise in choosing or changing those who govern them.
We can only wish you the very best of luck, Ambassador Zango. Viewers, we have had a fascinating conversation with Ambassador Zango Abdu, where he has called for a significant paradigm shift in the way in which we address conflicts and work for peace. The first element of the paradigm shift is that we need to realize most conflicts are local, that the forces that generate conflicts are local and they affect local people directly, and these local people have solutions that they could bring out. His second point is that in every community you go to in Nigeria, there are traditional practices for conflict resolution that we have ignored or overlooked over the years. And that if we want to fix the state of rising insecurity in this country, we need to go back to our local communities, look in detail at traditional conflict resolution mechanisms, empower people to use these things they already know about, and that will create the pathway towards peace and stability in the country. Thank you, viewers. We'll see you next week.